When modern people hear the word smoking, they usually picture something very specific. A cigarette, a lighter, an ashtray, a warning label. Nicotine, tobacco, addiction, and a small white stick sold in a box. Maybe someone outside a building, taking a break that looks like a tiny argument with stress. That is the modern image of smoking. So when we ask when humans first started smoking, your brain probably searches for the first cigarette. But that picture is only the last chapter, because before smoking was a cigarette, it was smoke. And before smoke was a habit, it was a tool. That is where the story gets weird. So there may not be one single first date for smoking. There are really three answers hiding inside the question. If by smoking we mean cigarettes, the answer is relatively recent. If we mean tobacco smoking, the story is much older. But if we mean intentionally breathing smoke, vapor, or heated plant fumes, the roots may reach much deeper. And the deeper we go, the harder the evidence becomes to prove. So this is not just a search for the first cigarette. It is a search for the moment humans began treating smoke as something the body could use. Imagine stepping into a small ancient shelter where the air already looks wrong. The ceiling is low, the walls are dark, and the doorway behind you is narrow. Near the center, someone nudges damp leaves and fragrant bark toward a small indoor fire. A thin gray ribbon rises from the plants. Then the smoke curls under the roof and slowly fills the space. Your eyes sting. Your throat sends a very clear message. Every modern health instinct in your body says one thing: leave. But the people around you may think the smoke is the treatment. Some sit close to it. Some may be treating illness, keeping insects away, changing the smell, or entering a ritual space. Some may believe the smoke carries a message to powers they cannot see. To us, this sounds like a terrible indoor air quality decision. To them, it may have been the whole point. Humans have delicate lungs. Our bodies are excellent at coughing, blinking, and complaining when the air gets spicy. And yet, across history, people repeatedly brought smoke into places where they lived, healed, prayed, preserved food, gathered, and sometimes breathed it in. So this video is not only asking when humans first started smoking. It asks why humans ever believed putting smoke into the body could be useful. And the answer is not that ancient people were careless. It is stranger than that. The first mystery is why people kept choosing smoky spaces even when their bodies complained. Today, we treat smoking as a narrow category. A cigarette is smoking. A pipe is smoking. A cigar is smoking. A vape is almost smoking, but with a little electronic disguise. But for most of human history, people did not divide these things so neatly. They had fire, plants, bodies, sickness, insects, spoiled food, bad smells, and ceremonies that needed to feel different. Smoke touched all of those problems. It was not only tobacco. It was not always pleasure. It was not just a product rolled in paper. People burned resins for scent. They used smoke around homes, food, insects, wounds, animals, graves, and ritual spaces. They heated herbs and breathed fumes. Smoke is strange because it is almost not a thing. You can see it, but you cannot hold it. It moves like air, but it carries smell, heat, particles, and sometimes plant chemicals. It can rise, vanish, change a room, and make your body react almost instantly. So if we only ask when humans started smoking, we trap the story inside a modern word. We make it sound like ancient history was always aiming toward a cigarette. That is almost certainly not how this began. The better question is how humans learned that smoke could change reality. How did people discover that one plant made a shelter smell better? How did they learn that smoky meat lasted longer? How did they notice that insects avoided certain fumes? How did they realize that some smoke changed how the body felt? And how did they tolerate smoke because the smoky space itself did something useful? That is the key. Smoke did not have to be pleasant to become valuable. It only had to solve problems that clean air could not solve. Clean air felt better. Smoky air sometimes worked better. To understand that, we have to start with the thing that made smoke unavoidable. We have to start with fire. Fire did not just give humans heat. It redesigned the human environment. A controlled fire could make a cold night survivable. It could make food softer, safer, and easier to digest. It could push back darkness, keep animals away, and bring people into a shared circle of warmth and light. But fire also made smoke a daily companion. Before anyone intentionally smoked anything, humans were already breathing smoke because fire was useful enough to tolerate. That was not smoking in the modern sense, but it was the first pathway into a bigger idea. Smoky air could be endured, then it could be controlled, and eventually it could be used. In shelters, camps, and hearths, smoke was part of the atmosphere. It was in hair, clothing, animal skins, sleeping places, and probably every blanket-like object nobody wanted to wash. The first lesson was not that smoke was pleasant. The first lesson was that smoke came attached to survival. And once humans lived with fire long enough, they could notice differences. Not all smoke is the same. Dry wood burns differently from wet wood. Fresh leaves smoke differently from old branches. Resinous plants smell different from plain fuel. Some smoke feels sharp and choking. Some smoke smells sweet, spicy, bitter, or clean. Some smoke drives insects away. Ancient experimentation did not need a laboratory. It needed memory. Someone had to remember which plant made the air easier to tolerate. Someone had to remember which plant made everyone's eyes water for an hour. Someone had to notice that a smoky sleeping area meant fewer bites by morning. People compared, repeated, and passed those observations on. That is how a dangerous thing can slowly become a controlled thing. Smoke was still irritating. Smoke was still risky. But humans are good at turning risks into tools when the reward is high enough. Smoke joined that list because it did things ordinary air could not do. One practical use was probably easy to notice. Smoke annoys insects. If you have ever sat beside a smoky campfire because mosquitoes were eating you alive, congratulations. You have joined one of the oldest bargains in human life. For ancient humans, biting insects affected sleep, children, stored food, animals, and where people could rest. Smoke did not need to be perfect. It only needed to make a night slightly more survivable. Then there was food. Smoke could help preserve meat and fish by drying the surface and discouraging insects and microbes. Humans did not need to understand microbes to understand results. They only needed to see that certain food lasted longer after hanging above smoke. A piece of meat that survives longer is stored labor. It is food for a bad day. Smoke also changed smell. Ancient life was extremely physical. Bodies, animal skins, shelters, wet materials, and rotting things all had opinions. Aromatic smoke could make a space feel controlled, cleaner, or more acceptable. The first air freshener may have been a burning plant someone hoped would improve the damper situation. Smell shapes emotion, memory, disgust, comfort, and whether a place feels safe. Smoke also made the invisible visible. A visible cloud can mark a place as occupied or transformed. So before smoke became spiritual, medicinal, or addictive, it was already practical. It was a tool against insects. It was a tool for food. It was a tool for smell. It was a tool for space. Humans may have started smoking earlier than we think, because smoke use began before smoking had a modern name. People did not have to love the sensation. They only had to learn that the smoky room sometimes worked better than the clean one. But practical smoke is only half the story. Because smoke did not only change the world outside the body, it could also change what happened inside the body. This is where smoke becomes even stranger. The lungs are one of the fastest routes into the bloodstream. Modern medicine understands this very well. But ancient people did not need modern pharmacology to notice effects. They only needed to notice that breathing certain fumes made the body respond quickly. Sometimes, the response was bad. Smoke could make people cough, choke, tear up, vomit, or feel dizzy. That is the body doing its job with dramatic honesty. But other fumes may have seemed useful. Calming, warming, stimulating, or strange. Some plants contain compounds that affect mood, breathing, pain, alertness, nausea, dreams, or perception. Not every ancient smoke practice was chemically effective. Some may have worked through comfort, ritual, expectation, or what we would now call placebo-like effects. But some plants really do affect the body, and when heat releases those compounds into air, humans can notice. In real life, the boundary between smoke, vapor, scent, and heated plant fumes was probably blurry. People were not sorting these into modern scientific categories. They were noticing what changed after the air changed. This is how smoke becomes a body technology. It is no longer just a cloud in the room. It becomes a carrier. It carries the properties of a plant into the breath. It can enter the nose, throat, and lungs. It can fill a shelter, surround a patient, and touch everyone at once. Across many medical traditions, people experimented with smoke, scent, steam, and heated herbs around the body. Some practices were probably based on real plant effects. Others may have worked through ritual, comfort, expectation, or social trust. The important point is not that every ancient remedy was correct. The important point is that people were experimenting with air as a delivery system. They were asking what happens when a plant stops being something you chew, swallow, or rub on skin. What happens when it becomes something you breathe? Trial and error would have mattered enormously. One smoke might soothe. Another might irritate. One might make a room smell sacred. Another might send everyone crawling toward the exit with the dignity of a frightened raccoon. Over time, people could build categories. Some smoke was useful for insects, food, ceremony, specialists, or unusual feelings. Some smoke was simply too strong. That last category matters. Because once smoke could change sensation, mood, or perception, it became more than practical. It became a bridge between ordinary life and unusual states of mind. A smoky space does not feel ordinary. It changes light, smell, breathing, attention, and behavior. It can make the room feel separate from everyday life. That is one reason smoke appears so often in ritual settings. It creates a boundary. On one side is normal space. On the other side is a space that smells different, looks different, and demands different behavior. You do not need a stone wall to separate sacred from ordinary. Sometimes a column of smoke can do it. In the Americas, tobacco offers one powerful example of smoke, carrying meaning far beyond casual use. Tobacco is native to the Americas, and many indigenous communities developed important, ceremonial, diplomatic, healing, or spiritual practices around it. The plant was not just a habit. The smoke could be part of a structured act connected to prayer, agreement, offering, medicine, or responsibility. Culture was not just decoration around a dangerous practice. In many cases, culture was the brake system. It told people when to use it, who should use it, and what the smoke was supposed to mean. That does not make smoke harmless, but it shows something important about humans. When we discover something powerful, we often build rules around it before we fully understand it. Smoke also worked as a group experience. A group gathered around the same smell and watched the same rising cloud. They shared the same discomfort, focus, memory, or altered feeling. Shared sensory experiences help bind groups together. It synchronized attention. It told the group, without much explanation, that something was happening here. Not because it was always pleasant, but because it was shared. But the very thing that made smoke powerful also makes it hard to study. It moves, it changes, and then it disappears. Smoke is a terrible witness. That is inconvenient for archaeologists, who prefer evidence that does not float away into the ceiling. Stone tools can last for hundreds of thousands of years. Bones can survive. Pottery can break and still be studied. But smoke does exactly what smoke does. It leaves. The plants used to make it often decay. Containers may have been wood, bark, skin, fiber, or basketry. Pipes, tubes, or inhalation tools may have broken or disappeared. Ash from a special smoke practice can look like ash from ordinary cooking. Burned seeds or plant remains can be suggestive, but they do not always explain the behavior. A plant found near a hearth might have been food, fuel, medicine, insect control, ritual material, or an accident. It might also have been deliberately inhaled. Those are very different stories from the same tiny blackened clue. Archaeologists can sometimes look for residues, chemical traces, burned seeds, pollen, hearth structures, or tools associated with smoke use. Those clues can be extremely valuable, but they still require interpretation. Evidence that a plant was burned does not automatically prove that someone was trying to breathe it. Evidence of smoke does not automatically prove smoking in the modern sense. That distinction matters. The story of ancient smoke is partly evidence and partly careful reconstruction. This is why the origin of smoking cannot be answered like the invention of a machine. There is no single first model. There is no neat moment when all humanity decided smoking was now a thing. Instead, there were probably many beginnings, many fires, many plants, many experiments, many mistakes, many practical discoveries, many ritual meanings added later, and many separate cultures developing different smoke practices for different reasons. So the most honest answer still has layers. Cigarettes are relatively recent. Tobacco smoking is much older, especially in the deep history of the Americas. Intentional inhalation of smoke, vapor, or heated plant fumes may go deeper still. But the older the behavior gets, the harder it becomes to prove. That uncertainty does not make the story weaker. It makes it more human. Human invention is often not a clean lightning bolt. It is usually a long relationship. People live beside a force. They notice patterns. They make mistakes. They create rules. They attach meaning. They pass the practice on. Smoke fits that pattern perfectly. But the modern cigarette changed the relationship in a dangerous way. In many ancient smoke practices, smoke was limited by context. It belonged to a ceremony, a healer, a season, a communal moment, or a specific plant and rule. That does not make it automatically safe. Smoke has always carried risks. But limits matter. A powerful thing used rarely is different from a powerful thing engineered for constant use. The old relationship with smoke was built around moments. The modern cigarette turned the moment into a loop. It separated smoke from many of its old boundaries. It made smoke portable, cheap, private, standardized, and repeatable many times a day. It concentrated a relationship with smoke into a small industrial object. Then modern commerce did what modern commerce often does. It found a human vulnerability and gave it a distribution network. The danger was not simply that humans discovered smoke. Humans had known smoke was powerful for a very long time. The dangerous turn was when smoke became a product designed for constant repetition. A ritual became a routine. A tool became a dependency. A plant with cultural boundaries became a global commodity. That is the tragedy of modern smoking. It took an ancient relationship with controlled danger and removed much of the control. It turned a limited technology into a habit machine. And today, the strange twist is that smoke itself is becoming optional. But the old pattern did not disappear, and the human weakness stays familiar. We are still drawn to invisible things that promise to change how we feel. That is the real warning inside this story. The danger was never just smoke. The danger was what happens when a powerful ritual becomes a repeatable product. And once that happened, the old reasons for smoke became harder to see. We started thinking of smoke mainly as addiction, pollution, and disease. Those are real and serious, but they are not the whole ancient story. The ancient story is about how humans learned to work with invisible forces before they could explain them. So when did humans first start smoking? The honest answer depends on what we mean by smoking. Cigarettes came late. Tobacco smoking is much older. Intentional breathing of smoke, vapor, or plant fumes may be older still. It may have grown slowly from the ancient human relationship with fire, plants, bodies, and altered air. Humans started smoking earlier than we think because smoking grew out of something older than tobacco. It grew out of the human relationship with smoke. People learned that smoke could protect a sleeping place from insects. They learned it could help food last beyond the day it was caught. They learned it could change the smell and feeling of a shelter. They learned it could carry plant effects into the body quickly. They learned it could surround a sick person, a ritual object, a home, or a gathering. They learned it could mark a boundary between ordinary life and special moments. They learned it could rise, vanish, and make the invisible feel active. Ancient people were not simply choosing discomfort for no reason. They were working with a force that was dangerous, useful, mysterious, and hard to control. That combination has always fascinated humans. We do not only run away from danger, we try to train it. We put fire in a hearth. We put sharp stone on a handle. We put poison in tiny medical doses. We put electricity inside walls and hope everyone remembers the rules. Smoke belongs to that same human pattern. It was air with power in it. Air carrying heat, air carrying scent, air carrying plants, air carrying warning, memory, medicine, ceremony, and risk. Long before glass screens and wireless signals filled the world with invisible tools, humans had learned that unseen things could change life. Smoke was one of humanity's first invisible tools. Not because it was safe, because it was powerful. And once humans learn that invisible things can change the world, they rarely stop reaching for them.